channel. It is a special edition in this episode because normally every second week we do a dream fight. And I come up with this idea a couple of weeks ago. I think the last time we did, by the way, was Jeff Fennick, Nail Inouye. I'm not sure whether I mentioned the results last time, but it was 72% of you watchers or viewers out there went for Inouye to beat Jeff Fennick. I copped a little bit of flack from people that I went for our man Jeff Fennick, but that's a different story. I will put the polls up for these particular fights, by the way. But the way this is going to work is, as I said, it's something a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different, obviously, to what we've done in the past. This is current day Australian fighters. Now, this is either going to be very successful or bomb big time because we get a lot of international viewers like to jump on and have their say, whether it be the talking points or the dream fights. And this is all Aussie dream fights. Now, you won't find this on BoxRec, obviously. So just to explain the way it works is this is obviously not a proper boxing event. This is purely hypothetical. And this is if I sat down and I had all the money in the world and was going to put on the best all-Aussie boxing event ever. This would be, or the current fighters, that is. These would be the fighters. Now, we're going to go through the card in a little minute, or in a little bit. And then we'll go through each fight individually, break the fight down. We're not going to spend all night, obviously, on each particular fight, but we'll go through the records of each fighter, and then we'll get into who wins and why. So it's billed as I said, the Dream Fight, or All Aussie Dream Fight Supercard. It's going to be at Marvel Stadium if it did take place. Marvel Stadium in Melbourne, 50, 60, 70,000 people. Take your pick. The home of boxing in Australia, Melbourne, that is. I'm a little bit biased, of course, and we'll see what we can come up with. So we've got I've got some comments as well. If you'd like to, obviously, I need your picks. This is why I'm doing it live, by the way. I could easily do it recorded, but I want your input. So what I want you to do is, as we go through it, give me your breakdown, some little bit of feedback of each individual fight. And then, of course, when we get into the result of each fight, that's where I want your feedback as much as possible. And we'll see what we can come up with. As I said, it's either going to be very successful or it's going to bomb big time, but we'll see how you go. I've already got a comment there. It's from Dundee Luke. How are you, Dundee or Luke? Welcome to the show. What's to say there? How many pay-per-views does Zoo versus Rafa do, assuming they both have belts, and Zoo moves up to middleweight to challenge? And also, how soon will Zoo do it? Okay, well, that's a really good first off question. Luke is a little bit away from this hypothetical supercard, of course, but I think pay-per-views in Australia, I think it would do very, very well. I can't comment 100% because you get a lot of different stories about numbers when it comes to pay-per-views. I've heard all the rumors about Mundine Green 1 and 2, Horns or Rafa, Zoo Horn, like all these different fights out there. Of course, when some of the biggest fights of all time in Australia took place, there was no pay-per-view, but let's see. Now, if a big fight in the US was about 1 million, and they've got 365 million people compared to our 25 million, I mean, you do that by the sums, and we represent about 14 to 15% of the population. So if you look at, let's just say 15%, let's just say, so they do 1 million views. A similar type of event for us would be 150,000 people. Okay, so if you're judging on that 1 million views in the States is massive, and the signal of a Mayweather type of fight, or Pacquiao, Canelo, one of those types of guys, that's 1 million. It's 150,000 here. I think it would do 125,000. There you go, just a stab in the dark. And as I said, I don't know for sure how it all works, but 125,000, and I will get to the card in a minute here, guys. For all you that have tuned in for this, we're getting a little bit off track here, but thank Luke for that. So 125,000 times, let's say $60. So there's $7.5 million. Actually, it probably works into this card pretty well, I think, Luke. So we're talking figures. We've just mentioned the crowd and everything else. Let's do a quick number, how much we think this card's going to generate. So $7.5 million through pay-per-view. Now, they only get half normally. Main event would normally take half for expenses. I'm not quite sure how it works with something of that big. Now, surely they wouldn't take $3.75 million. I'm not sure. They normally do it with just an average pay-per-view, but let's just say they took $2.5 million. I don't know. That's still a pretty big. It might cost them $500,000 to do the show, a couple of $1,000,000. So that leaves $5 million. The gate, let's say 60,000 people at an average of a couple of $100. All right, there's that is $12 million. So let's just even say it's $10 million. Take a little bit off freebies and that sort of stuff. So there's $15 million we've got to put on this card, plus some sponsorship. That's all just money for Jam that. So we're going to say we've got $15 million to put on this show. So this is why we're going to go all out. So I hope you enjoy. But that's just a little bit of an indication there. Luke, did I answer your question there? So I said 125. How soon would you do it? Well, I think that depends a lot, Luke, on circumstances, doesn't it? I mean, you've both got big fights coming up on March the 30th. So I would think if Tim wins against Thurman, which we expect him to do, I don't think he's going to move to 160 anytime soon. I think he's still got maybe the Crawford fight, maybe Spence. He's supposed to be back in training. There's a few other fights around. Maybe there's Charlo coming back. Look, I think he would wait around for those guys. And if he doesn't, well, he's got the middleweight division to go to. However, I think he would only jump up quickly if Michael Zarafa does win that belt and Tim needs it to maybe Canelo's team or Crawford's team or someone that said, look, we'd prefer you to have a 160-pound belt as well. Then I think that's what happens. But I think more than anything, it all comes down to Tim's terms. And I think that even includes if Michael happens to win that WBA belt and Tim doesn't win and decides to move up anyway, I still think it's done on Tim's terms, because I think Michael needs Tim a hell of a lot more than than Tim needs Michael. And that might be a funny statement considering that Zarafa might have the title and Zoo mightn't. But I still think that Tim is Michael's cash cow. I think that's what it is. So I think it depends on circumstances, Luke. If Tim wins, I think you might be looking at another 12 to 18 months of Tim being at 154. If Michael loses this fight, it will never happen, I don't think, in my opinion. But that's why it's just my opinion. All right, well, let's get into it, guys. I hope I answered your question there, Luke. But anything, as it's been shown, anything can happen these days. But it just depends on that March 30 card. All right, guys, so into tonight's episode of the Dream Fights. Let's run through the card. We've got 7 fights on this card. And we're going to start, we've got 2 girls or female fights and 5 male fights, okay? So we're going to kick it off with the girls, and this is Taylor Robinson versus Jasmine or Jazzy Parr. They're going to kick off the card. We'll call this the prelim card, the pre-pay-per-view card, free on Fox Sports, if we're going to be specific. So 8 rounds in the super flyweight division, a really, really good fight, this one. Then we're going to jump to the super featherweights, and this time it's the boys. It is Dana Coolwell, Rocky Ogden, 8 rounds over, at super featherweight, as I said. So that is fight number 2 on the card. The last fight on the prelims is Isaac Hardman, Joel Camilleri over 8 rounds at middleweight. We've had to cap these at 8 rounds, by the way, guys, because all these fights could be 10 rounds, but we've got to fit it in some way. We've got about 60-odd rounds, and it's a long night. So this will be the main fight of the prelim card, which should end at about 6:30, and then we'll get into the main card at 7. All right, then on to the main card. Again, we're going back to the girls. Ebony Bridges versus Shanika Johnson, 10 rounds at bantamweight. Bit of a catchweight fight. Both of these girls, former world champions, so I think it'll be an awesome fight between these two. Then we get into the big 3. The males in all these fights, we've got Jason Maloney and Sam Goodman. Again, it's got to be a catchweight, 10 rounds super bantamweight, although Jason did start his career at super bantamweight, fought a lot of his career at super bantamweight. Sam's obviously one of the leading contenders at 122. But for this exercise, it's going to be 10 rounds at 122. Then into the co-main event, we've got George Kambosos Jr. coming up against Liam Wilson. Again, 10 rounds at lightweight. Again, a catchweight fighter. Liam's obviously a 130-pound fighter. George at 135. So to make this happen, we're going to make Liam go up. Now, this could easily be a world title fight, of course, because George could win that belt in May. But again, it's all hypothetical. We're going to make Liam Wilson jump up in weight to fight George Kambosos at 135. And then in the big one, like we've already discussed, it is Tim Tszyu, Michael Zarafa, 12 rounds at middleweight. Now, this could easily be for the WBA middleweight title. We probably should have made it for that title, but again, it's all hypothetical. So 12 rounds at middleweight, whether it be for the WBA belt or not, but that's what we're going to do. So that is the card. So Tim Tszyu, Michael Zarafa at middleweight over 12 rounds. If you've got some other fight you would think would make the cut or to be the main event, let me know. I just don't think there's any bigger fight at the moment if you're going to match Aussies against Aussies. Now, I know there's probably maybe some more mouth-watering fights out there, if you will. But this is the fight that would get everyone talking. Tim, of course, is an out-and-out superstar in Australian sport, not just Australian boxing. And Michael Zarafa, you got to have a villain. For every good guy, you got to have the flip side and the bad guy, if you will, the villain, and that is Michael Zarafa. Similar to what we had with Danny Green and Anthony Mundine, Barry Michael, Lester Ellis. It just goes back all through the years. And this would be a classic case of good guy versus bad guy. Tim Tszyu versus Michael Zarafa in the main event. All right, so let's get started, guys. So what we're going to do, we'll start with the girls. I'm going to actually bring up the box records of, we'll do the two, and then I'll type in another two, and we'll just go through from there. So Taylor Robinson, Jazzy Parr, 8 rounds at super flyweight. Let's start with Taylor Robinson with her career. So you can see there, 9-1. You can see she has got a big fight coming up for the IBO super flyweight title, Gloria Gallardo. So she's 9-1. That'll be her biggest fight of her career. She only had the one loss. That, of course, was to Shannon O'Connell, only in her 4th fight. So got to give her a leave pass for that one. Shannon at the time was at the top of her game and couldn't really get fights at that stage. Taylor Robinson, to her credit, stepped up. So not a lot of big names on there. You can see there, probably apart from Shannon, she fought Kylie Former. Good win. Sarah Hingerton, not a bad win. Then a few internationals throw in there as well. So still very green, but as is Jazzy Parr. So I just think she's a super talented young fighter, is Taylor Robinson. She's obviously been rewarded with her performances so far, with headlining the first Premier Boxing Series Ace boxing event. So that's a credit to what she's put in so far. Before we go on to Jazzy Parr, we've got a comment there. Agree would be the biggest seller, but some better matchups in the lower weights. Yeah, I do agree, Anthony, but we've got to have a main event. We've got to have a big seller, and this is it. I'm with you. If I had a card of what I think would be actually the best fights overall, there's probably a few of these that might not make the cut and a few that would. And if you guys have got any suggestions down there, put them in the chat. All right, so let's go to her opponent, Jasmine Parr. Now, you can see there she's only had the 4 fights and not overly experienced in boxing. Now, you can see her, first, she's had 2 fights against the same girl, of course. Is it Nicola or Nasilia? I think it's Nicola Costello. So 2 wins over her. And the other one was a 0-2 record, but Brianna Harrison was her latest fight back in July. But the reason I've had no hesitation matching her up with Taylor Robinson is the fact she's got a very extensive Muay Thai background. I think it's more Muay Thai. It might have been some kickboxing, I'm not sure. Obviously, the daughter of John Wayne Parr, the legend of Muay Thai. Oh, Peter, I knew this was going to come, mate. I'll get to you in a sec. So I've had no hesitation throwing in with Taylor Robinson because of her extensive background. She's only 21, so still only a baby, really. But I think, what's Taylor Robinson's age? 25. So 2 young girls. But I just think in the scheme of things with Australian boxing at the moment, 2 very, very talented young ladies, and it would be a ripper fight. We'll just go back there. Now, I knew this was coming, Peter. Where is Jai Apataya? And it's a very, very good question. Obviously, I've made room for all of the other elite fighters in Australia. And I actually had a couple of people. We had probably 60, 70, might even been a little bit more suggestions about fights, by the way. So this is a bit of a throw together of all of them. Now, Jai Apataya came up. Really, there was a couple that said Jason Waitley. I just don't think that's a competitive fight. I'm sorry, apologies to Jason, but I just don't think that's competitive. They did fight as amateurs a few times. I'm pretty sure Jai won clearly every single time. And I know pros are a lot different to the amateurs, but I just think the overall talent of Jai Pattaya, no matter whether it's over 6, 8, 10, 12 rounds, 20 rounds, it doesn't matter. Jai Pattaya gets the job done every day of the week. The other interesting one, which I was really tempted to put him in with, Peter, because I really wanted to put him on this card, was Floyd Masson. Now, I've got a lot of respect for Floyd Masson, always in fights of the year, but I just think his last fight, and I can't remember who it was against, it was a great fight. Just so full of heart was Floyd Masson. But at the end of the day, he was stopped pretty comprehensively by his opponent. Look, as I said, it was a great fight. Floyd gave it all he's got, and I'm an admirer of his. I'm sure he'll be back, but I just, again, don't see that as really being, at this stage, a competitive fight. And Jai's just getting better and better and better. So I just think, as much as I would have liked to have got him on the card, Peter, I just couldn't find room for him because, again, there's just no one, I don't think, that could go with him in any capacity. So that's why I would have loved to have him on there. And at one stage, I did have him on the card against Masson, but a few other fights popped up. But anyway, still with Peter. Opataya versus Huni. Catchweight. Opataya destroys him. Now, that is a fight. That was actually suggested a few times, Peter. But, again, that might be like a second edition, I think. Maybe next year we might be talking about that. But at this stage, while I would love to see them come up against each other, it would be awesome. But, not at this stage. Anthony, before I get in the results of Jasmine Parr and Taylor Robinson by the par. Opataya versus Sweet Pea. At least Sweet Pea should make the weight this time, irrespective. Jai is too much. That's another epic fight, Anthony. That would be... I would probably rather see that than maybe the Huni fight with Jai Pattaya. I think that would be a ripper. Very similar styles and just super, super talents. Either one, I mean, isn't that just great that Jai's got those options down the track? But just a little bit early to talk about those fights, Anthony and Peter. But as I said, in another year's time, that's what we might be talking about. All right, let's get the first prelim out the road. Taylor Robinson, Jazzy Parr. And you're right, Peter. She is a very nice fighter, and she's got a bit of spunk about her. I like that. Got a bit of attitude. Taylor Robinson, look, sort of similar styles. They can both box. They can both. I won't say they can both punch because at this weight, very hard to get real punches. But they both don't mind taking center ring and having a bit of a go. And I think it would be an exciting fight. Very, very similar styles, and it was very, very hard to come up with a winner, but of course we've got to have one. There's no draws on this card, by the way. I'm going to put my money, if I had to, on Taylor Robinson to get a very, very close decision. I just think she's a little bit more rounded, got a couple more gears, and it's just maybe a little bit early just to see what Jazzy Parr's got at boxing. I just think she's a super talent, but at this stage, I'm just going to go with Taylor Robinson in a very, very close decision win. And Taylor's obviously had that fight against Shannon O'Connell, and she did very, very well, by the way. I think it might have even been a split decision in the end. So a very good performance by her. I think she's progressed really well over the last couple of years. So I'm going to back her to win an 8-round decision. I'm going to make it unanimous, but close. I think it might be 5 rounds to 3 in favour of Taylor Robinson. I think she kicks off our card, the biggest card ever in Australian boxing, with a unanimous decision win over Jazzy Parr. Anthony says, might be a bit too early for Parr at the moment, but in a year. Look, Anthony, as I said, mate, I did actually think that at the start, but she's had a lot of experience. She's probably been in combat sports. She's probably been 3 or 4 years old with her dad. If you follow her on social media, you can see she's been around since she's been a little kid. So I think that way wouldn't be a drama. And Taylor Robinson didn't have an extensive amateur career. I know she went to the Commonwealth Games, but didn't have a lot of fights. I'm not quite sure exactly how many she had, but I know it wasn't a hell of a lot compared to a lot of other fighters out there. So I think that sort of makes up for it. And as pros, as I said, Taylor Robinson's had 10 fights compared to 4, but I just think Jasmine Parr's extra experience in Muay Thai just brings her up to the level just a little bit. All right, what do we got there? Paul Michael Craig, how you going there, mate? Long time watcher, first time commenting. Love the channel, Lyndon. Well, thanks very much, mate. I appreciate that. And don't be shy. Make sure you comment on our fights or any of our shows. And this is probably a little bit different to what we normally do. So we'll see how many views we get and how many comments, but it's going great so far. So thanks, Paul. Very very good to have your comment on there. And Peter, well, he disagrees with me. He thinks Jasmine Parr gets the job done. What about you guys out there? Before we move on to the next one, because there is about a 30-minute lag, 30-second delay lag, by the way. So feel free to put the comment in there, and I'll come back. So there's one for Jazzy Parr. As I said, I went for Taylor Robinson. All right, so while we're just waiting on a couple more comments there, I'm gonna put in the names of our next opponents or next contestants. I'll just type that in there. We'll get Dana Coolwell up, and we'll get Rocky Ogden up as well. All right, so where is he? Rocky Ogden and Dana Coolwell. Deadly Coolwell. All right, okay. Paul says Jazzy usually fights at 112. Taylor probably too big. Yeah, actually, that's a good question. Good comment there, Paul. I did do the research into both of them. I was pretty sure that Jasmine Parr was a super flyweight as well, which is what, 115. But now you've said that, now I'm going to have to go back. I think she comes up for the fight there, Paul. I think she would do it. But that is, maybe I hope I haven't stuffed that up, because I was pretty sure she was a super flyweight. All right. She has fought at 115 in her first fight. We'll just quickly go back to that. She had her first fight at 115, then 114 and a half. Then she did go back to 112. So she's had 2 fights at Superfly, 2 fights at flyweight. But look, there's Dana Coolwell there. We'll go back to them in a second. I just think she is just a super enough talent that she would give Taylor Robinson a great fight. And Taylor Robinson actually, I think, went up to bantamweight to fight Shannon O'Connell. So, yeah, it's a good point there, mate. And that's probably another reason why I would go for Taylor Robinson as well. All right, so let's get on to the next fight. And here we go. It is the second fight of our prelim card. Dana Coolwell, Rocky Ogden, 8 round at super featherweight. And I love this fight. Now, I will admit, no one actually voted for this fight or brought it up, but this is probably the only fight I picked out of all of them. I love this fight. Dana Coolwell, Rocky Ogden. What a fight this would be. So Dana Coolwell, deadly he is. So you can see there, 12-2. Now, those 2 losses actually happened pretty early in his career. He stepped up pretty quick, and in my opinion, he actually stepped up a little bit too quick. And I was actually pretty happy that they put him back a couple of notches and got him a couple of wins. So you can see there, 12-2. Had a couple of losses early. So Jake Wilde, that was actually a real surprise, that one. It was a close fight, but I actually thought Dana did enough to win that. But obviously, Jake Wiley got the win, and he's gone on to be a very, very good young prospect as well. And then Ender Luces, that was in 2022. Now, again, I actually thought that he got the win in that one as well. But both fights are very, very close, so no arguments. But what I like about it is they put him back. They stepped him back a couple of notches, and he's got on the back of, 2, 4, 5 fight winning streak. He's got another fight obviously lined up in March against Fernando, who's at Tagpuno for the IBO Intercontinental Featherweight title. And he was a good amateur as well, was Dana Coolwell. On to Rocky Ogden. Only had the 6 fights, but again, I've got no dramas putting him in with Dana Coolwell because he's had a very extensive kickboxing, Muay Thai, I think it was, or combat sports record, and he is a killer. We all saw him back in June last year when he absolutely demolished Mark Schliebs in 1 round. And I'm not going to go over it again. Everyone knows my opinion of how Mark Schliebs ended up in a pay-per-view 6 months later or 8 months later, whatever it is. But that was just an absolute demolition job from Rocky Ogden, part of the Premier Boxing Series stable as well. So you can see there, look, even his first fight against Fred Mundrabi, who was 15-3-1, Ty Narkle 2-0, Ben Hands or Cameron Hands 3-0, McGaver at 3-0, Matei 5-3, and that was actually a pretty good fight as well. So his caliber of opponents have been very, very good for someone that's so green. And I really like the fact that when he got Mark Schliebs hurt, he got him out of there, no drama. He did drop him. It was a bit of a flash knockdown, but then pounced on him, and he is a very, very good finisher, is Rocky Ogden. So I like this kid. I think he's a very, very good young prospect. So let's go to some comments there. So Anthony A says, cracker of a fight, Dana would be my pick. Yes. Paul says, I always thought Tasman rushed Coolwell. Yeah, I was a similar opinion, Paul. I actually thought that those two fights, look, the Jake Wiley fight is probably good in hindsight a little bit, but I think at the time they probably saw it as a good fight for him. Obviously, it wasn't. The Luces fight, I think that was for a World Youth title or something. He probably stepped up just a little bit too much in that one. But, I am happy they pulled him back a couple of cogs. And I think he's really grown because of that. And it was good that they didn't sort of cast him aside. 12-2 now. And this is probably a good example that just because you have a couple of losses early in your career doesn't mean your career's over. And he's, another 3 or 4 fights, he could be knocking on the door of a world title. Who knows? So... but we will see. All right, so on to the result itself. Geez, where do we start with that? Look at the styles of both fighters. Dana Coolwell, hence the name Deadly. He can punch, he can box. Like a lot of Indigenous fighters, he can do it all. Good on his feet, good footwork, he's fast. He has good angles, especially with his punches and footwork. Rocky Ogden, on the other hand, is just and surprisingly for me, that coming from that Muay Thai kickboxing background, or I think it was more, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure it was Muay Thai, or he might have had some kickboxing. Either way, I was surprised at his boxing ability and natural boxing ability, even though his background is predominantly in other combat sports. So I was really impressed, as I said, that he's a good finisher, he can punch, and he's got that killer instinct. So I think these two absolutely go to war for 8 rounds. I think it would probably be almost the most entertaining fight on the card. I think it would be an absolute ripper. And you talk about quality fights as far as being on these cards. This should have been probably a lot higher, but we're talking about obviously the appeal to the viewing public, and I just think it's probably a little bit down the pecking order for probably those casual fans. But this has the potential to steal the show, in my opinion. So look, I think the way the fight goes, I think Rocky, like he always does, and hence his name, of course, being Rocky. I think he presses the action, throws more punches. I think Dana Coolwell keeps him at range, uses his hands, his footwork. And I just think what gets him across the line for me is Dana Coolwell is the fact that he's just a little bit more experienced and probably a bit like Taylor Robinson with Jazzy Parr, a little bit more rounded in boxing and a little bit more experienced. His whole career has been boxing. And I think he wins an 8-round decision over Rocky Ogden. I think he gets on top later in the fight. I think the first 4 or 5 rounds would be give or take. It would be a war. I think they would both have their moments. But I've just got a feeling that Dana Coolwell's overall boxing ability and experience would just come to the surface in the last couple of rounds. And he would get, I'll call it, could even be split, but I'm going to call it a unanimous decision. But maybe 5 rounds to 3. Could even be 5-3. For him and a 5-3 for Rocky Ogden. But either way, this, as I said, would have the potential to be a show stealer. Because these two guys can go, I can tell you. And so much respect for both of these fighters. Peter Nutt, obviously, he disagrees. He says Rocky, he's got that killer instinct. Yes. And Paul says, I reckon Rocky gets it done inside the distance. Okay, all right. So... all right, well, I'm in the minority for that one. I'll be interested to see what the polls say about this, because what I'm going to do after this is recorded on YouTube, I will tomorrow I'll put all the fights up and everyone can vote on them, and we'll get a bit of an indication on the next episode of who won. So, all right, well, that's 2-1 already. Anthony went for Dana, so we're 2-2 so far. And anyone else out there want to vote, then let us know. But for me, Dana Coolwell gets it done over 8 rounds by decision. All right, while we're getting a few more comments in there, I'm just going to bring in our next, or type up the next contestants or fighters. And this has Grudge Match written all over it. And it is a head splitter I'm talking about, by the way. Where are we? Oh, Kamakeo. All right. All right, guys. So no more comments coming through. Let's go to the next fight on the card. We have the head splitter, Isaac Hardman and Kamakeo, Joel Camilleri. 8 rounds at middleweight. You could probably call it a catch weight because Isaac's a middleweight. Joel's probably more of a super welterweight or 154, but he has fought at middleweight before. So we're going to Get him to go up. Could even be a catch weight. Who knows? It could be 158 or something like that. But either way, these two, there's been a lot of talk about these two fighting for a long time. And for whatever reasons, whether it be money or whatever it might, it's always about money, isn't it? For some reason, it's just never happened. But being the super promoter that we are here at Boxing Deep Dive Promotions, we've got the job done. We've paid them what they want. The terms, I think both fighters would have preferred a 10-round fight, but we've got to fit them all on the card. So we're going to go with 8 rounds at middleweight. The head splitter, Isaac Hardman, Joel Camilleri. Let's have a look at the records. There he is, the head splitter, 15-2. Geez, you got to like that moustache, that porn star moustache, don't you? Got a big fight, obviously, booked in there against Andre Sabadera on the 13th of March. So he goes back there and actually promoted a couple of his fights early in his career. And I've got to tell you, one of the easiest guys to get along with, by the way. Nothing's too hard. Just turns up, gets wrapped, puts his gear on, and just gets in there and fights. This is a promoter's dream, is this guy. Does not care who he fights, especially early in his career. It was just about, well, in his own nickname there, about splitting heads open. He just didn't care. And one of his fights here, I'll just bring it up quickly. Where was it? It was Matt Sheen. There you go, his second fight. So I promoted that one. Matt Sheen was a hot prospect at the time, even though he'd only had the 2 fights. And Isaac was a late replacement. You see, he only had 1 fight at the time, but he'd spoiled Lucas Miller's night as well. He was undefeated, knocked him out in the first round. So we got Isaac in, knocked Matt out in the first round, and literally after he'd knocked Matt out, went and had a shower, went and got dressed, and headed to the airport an hour after his fight. That's the type of guy he is. He's a really good guy. And then I promoted him. Where was it? I promoted his fight with. Where was it? It was Bendigo, 2019. There it is, Mitchell Whitelaw. That was in conjunction with D&L Promotions. That was on the Horn Zarafa undercard. And then I promoted him against 2019 again. There he is, against one Adrian Monzon. So 3 times I promoted Isaac Hardman. And yeah, as I said, he's a character. All right, so looking at his career. So you can see there, he started off with 3 first-round knockouts. Now, Lucas Miller, undefeated prospect. A lot of raps on him. First round, bang. Matt Sheen, as I just said, hot prospect, bang. First round. I can't remember his first name. Is it Puono Lapetti? Very, very good amateur with a lot of raps on him as well. What card was that on? I remember that card. That was on a big event. Tim Zhu. So that was Tim Zhu. What was that one? That was 2009. Who was the main event on that? Where is it? Well, it must have been Tim Zhu. Yeah, it must have been. Yeah, it must have been Tim Zhu. I don't remember. In Denton, maybe. Oh, Paul Gallen it would have been. I'd suppose. Whoever it was anyway. So it was a big card. Sorry, getting off track here. And bang, first round. So he had 3 first-round knockouts in a row to start his career against 3 very, very well-credentialed and highly hyped prospects. So got them out of there, then started to step it up a little bit. But the common denominator with him was he was continued to fight good fighters. Or probably old Terence Montgomery was a bit of a that was at Eastside Gym. So, but in the Mitchell, the Whitelaw fight, the Monzon fight, Jamie Weech first round again. Tej Singh, questionable that one was, but he got across the line, had the knockout of Mark Luke. This is when he was fighting very, very regularly. Robert Berridge, who had 38 fights at the time. Manuel Carlos, again, very hyped fighter he was. Hasn't really done anything since. Has he done anything since? He was very much hyped. Nope, hasn't fought for nearly 3 years, so 2.5 years. So that's a real shame that he hasn't come back. Then it started to slow down a little bit after that, 6 months before he fought Adam Stowe. The Michael Zarafa fight, of course. Bo Hart has paid for that. Rowan Murdoch, no disgrace in losing that. That was a close decision again, and you see he's had a couple of wins since then. So the head splitter going ahead at a very, very good rate of knots is Isaac Hardman, and progressing nicely. His opponent, Joel Camilleri, 36 fights, so very, very experienced. Turned pro all the way back in 2012. He actually lost his his second fight, then lost his 5th fight. Seen another one, Anthony Buttigieg. It's a shame he didn't go on with it. Buttigieg, but you see there, regularly fought at the Melbourne Pavilion back in the day. Lost a few early, but always backed himself. That's what I like about him. Always backed himself. Changed trainers if he needed to change trainers. Changed managers, changed promoters, whatever it took just to get what he thought was an advantage or progress in his career. And he's just done a really, really good job of hanging around. And most of his losses, especially his later ones, especially there, Dwight Ritchie, of course, the late Dwight Ritchie, Tim Zhu, of course, Koen Mazudia twice. And he's just always backed himself, as I said. And he's bounced around a little bit. He's gone to Queensland. He's now in Sydney. So a lot of respect for Kamakayo. But so I think there's a really even fight. We'll get a couple of comments there. Glenn says Hardman all the way. Paul says Hardman by KO. Peter says Hardman lost a lot of credibility against Arafa. Joel gets the unanimous decision. Okay, well this... Look, it's a really interesting one because Isaac Hardman, again, from a MMA background this time. So unlike Josie Parr and Rocky Ogden, he has more of an MMA background rather than Muay Thai or kickboxing, whatever it might be. And he's got heavy hands, which he showed in MMA and, of course, in boxing. But I will say with Isaac, he is limited to some extent as far as some of his boxing skills go. Now, he makes up for it a lot with his power and his pressure and all that sort of stuff. Footwork can be a little bit off sometimes. He can get exposed by people or fighters with good footwork. For me, he stands up a little bit upright and doesn't move his head a lot. So they're probably the things that I think he has been exposed a couple of times, which Michael Zarafa did, of course, and Rowan Murdoch to some extent. Joel Camilleri, on the other hand, isn't... I don't think. Well, no, he's not at the elite level as far as my opinion goes, as far as Zarafa and Murdoch goes. But he's a very, very awkward fighter. Spends a lot of time honing his skills. Always in the gym, always in shape, and he's very, very awkward. And you got to remember when he fought Tim Zhu, he gave Tim Zhu all he could handle. I know Tim won a very comprehensive decision. What were the scores in that, by the way? It was. Hang on, where was it? When did he fight? All right, so it was 8 rounds to 2, 9 to 1, 9 to 1. Okay, so Tim won pretty much all but 1 or 2 rounds on the judges' scorecards, but he gave Tim all he could handle. He cut his eye, and Tim looked very, very robot-like trying to track him down. And before that, Tim was just a wrecking machine. So I'm not saying Joel is at that caliber, as I said, but he's just got that style. He's in, he's out. He's very busy. He'll move to his left, he'll move to his right, and I think he really gives Isaac Hardman a lot of trouble, and he could expose him big time with that awkwardness. So this is probably one of the hardest fights on the card to pick a winner, if you ask me. Peter says Hardman holds his hands too low. Well, as I said, mate, he is guilty of that. But my main thing is, if you look at his, I'm not being critical. I hope he's not watching because I'll probably see him at the next fights. But it's only, helpful suggestions if he does watch this. But for me, he stands too upright. His back leg is not bent. Okay, if you watch him, his back leg is dead straight. And for me, that just makes him nice and high. As I said, he doesn't move his head really at all. And to think that he's had so many highlight reel knockouts with those couple little flaws, imagine what he could do, I think, if he tweaked a few things. If he bent that back leg and got himself a little bit more power by that side to side, just a little subtle left, a little right, rather than coming sort of straight ahead with his sort of head high, I think he could do a lot of damage. But as they stand, I think Joel Camilleri gives Isaac Hardman all he can handle. It's a very, very close fight. But look, I've got to pick a winner. I'm actually going to still go for Isaac Hardman to get the job done. And not with a lot of confidence, I will say. Because Joel, as I said, he's very awkward. He pops the jab. He's in, he's out. He leads with the left. He leads with the right. Then he scoots off to the left, scoots off to the right. And he has shown that he can actually punch Joel Camilleri. But I just think Isaac is just at the stage now where I'm just going to pick him like by a razor-thin decision. And it wouldn't surprise me if it went the other way, but I'm going to actually have to go with Isaac, but no confidence at all. I've got to pick a winner. So the fact it's only 8 rounds, if it was a 10-round fight, it could be a little bit different. but I think the pressure that Isaac puts on early maybe puts Joel on the back foot a little bit, wins a few of the early rounds. Joel maybe comes home, but I'm not doing it with a lot of confidence at all, guys. But that will be the main fight of our prelim card. Isaac Hardman with a split or very, very close unanimous decision. But I wouldn't be surprised if it went the other way. I really wouldn't. Glenn says, so nice to hear someone talking about the back leg. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one that notices it, Glenn. And look, I've got so much respect for Isaac Hardman. I really do. And I've said for a long time, even Blair Studley, his coach, I've got a lot of respect for Blair. But one suggestion I would probably make to the team, if I was part of it, is to maybe bring in more of a boxing-orientated coach with very good credentials, just to tweak a few things, not to say to take over or anything like that, just to come in, because I'm sure all you guys out there that have been around boxing, you've Glenn has said there, he sees the back leg. Just those little things stand out when you're from a boxing background. And maybe they don't see it because they're from that MMA background, but maybe just bring in someone, a really well-credentialed boxing coach, just to go into camp with them and just tweak a few little things. But as I said before, the fact that he's knocked out so many guys with in my opinion, a couple of flaws in his technique is just a credit to what he's been able to achieve. But it also shows how much he could maybe do and achieve if he just tweaked a couple of things like that. But I'm still going to go with him over Joel. Just. Peter says Joel without boxing. Yep, not going to argue with that, mate. Paul says Hardman, Taylor Robinson, and Liam Wilson all grew up in the same suburb. Caboolture, is that right? So, all right, well, they must have bred them tough in that area, Paul, and put something in the water maybe, but all very, very good boxers. Where is, I had it in my head that maybe Sam Goodman's from there. He's New South Wales, isn't he? Wollongong he's from, isn't he? Yeah, because Volkanovski's from there as well. I didn't know that, Paul, thanks for bringing that up. So there it is in the main fight of our prelim card before we switch over to the main event pay-per-view. Isaac Hardman wins a razor-thin decision over Joel Camilleri. All right, well, before we get a couple more comments, I'll type in the names of our next fight on the card. Where is it? Shanika, her name is. All right, so I'll bring up her record. Switch them around. All right, guys, here we go. We're on to the main card now. So we've got a 4-fight main card. So what is that? 42 rounds. So she could be a late one. All right, let's get into it. Here it is. We're back to the girls. And what a fight this would be. Ebony Bridges, Shanika Johnson, 10 rounds at 118 or bantamweight. Now, Ebony Bridges has obviously won the 118-pound world title at the IBF version. Shanika Johnson won the 122-pound version of that belt, the IBF belt, but has fought a lot of her career at 118. So whether they fight at 118 or they fight in the middle at 120, well, whatever. But I'm sure when you're talking 4 pounds, we can work it out. So both lost their last fights. Let's start with Ebony Bridges. She lost her last fight, of course, lost her world title. So she has a 9-2 record. She got a world title shot in just her, 6th fight. She was beaten. Oh, sorry, I better bring up her record there. Sorry, guys. Where she was beaten by Shannon Courtney very, very comprehensively there. But had a few probably easier wins. You can see there, 2-1 her first opponent. She actually got dropped in that fight, I remember. She crack her ankle or fractured her ankle or something. So, and then Lara Woods. But Sean Dabu, the next fight, had a 1-11 record, so we'll wipe that one. Crystal Hoy had a 6-10 record, so we'll wipe that one. Carol Earl, well, if you can call her a journeyman in female terms, and she was a journeyman. So either way, but I will give full credit to Ebony Bridges in that I think no way anyone deserves a world title fight in the 6th fight, by the way, but used her assets, whether that be her personality, whatever it might be, her contacts. We won't get into all that, but whatever she used to get there, it worked because she got that fight with Shannon Courtney. Did lose the fight. Who can forget the eye after that? But credit to her, she was back pretty quick. So she had quick wins over Bet Connolly, Malis Ganglife. So what was that? only, what was that, 4 months, a month after that, 4 months, 6 months. So she had, 3 fights in the next 12 months. So she got back on the horse, and credit to her, she won that world title against Maria Cecilia Roman. Interesting that Roman had 16 wins but never had a knockout. So if she was going to pick a world champion to fight and beat, that was her. But credit to her, she got the job done over her. That was in England. And then, of course, who could forget the grudge match with Shannon O'Connell? That was probably the most spiteful Aussie all-female fight that I think I've ever seen. And that's saying something, because Shannon had fights with Shanika Johnson and Taylor Robinson and a few others where it was pretty spiteful. But, there was lots of words exchanged in that one. And then, what was that, a year later, she did break a hand, I think, from memory, in that fight, I think it was. And then she lost her world title. And that was back in December. And then we go to Shanika Johnson. We had a couple of comments there. Bridges has 2 things in her favour. Well, I think... Well, isn't it? Shanika Johnson's got the whole OnlyFans and that going at the moment, hasn't she? So I think she's probably got some assets as well. But we're not talking about all that. If you guys subscribe, good luck to you. Glenn says Johnson, Ebony is done. Okay. Paul says 2 good sorts, but both with horrible accents. Well, yeah, you're probably right with that one. We'll get into... Well, there's Paul Haraba. G'day, Paul. G'day, mate. Hope Sugar gets back in the winning circle. She has. Now, she's on the Kambosos Haney undercard, isn't she, against Nina Hughes? It's not actually listed at the moment, Paul, but she's obviously got a big fight there. I'm not quite sure what Ebony Bridges will do. But Shanika Johnson, now, I actually promoted Shanika's first, what it is, 1, 2, 3, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4 fights, I think it was. Her first 4 fights I promoted. Actually, was it even longer? More? No, actually, I promoted 1, 2, 3, 4. Then she had a couple of fights in Queensland. One. No, I take that back. Her first, been a long time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Her first 5 fights. And then she fought up on Angelo DiCarlo's card. Then I promoted her next 2 fights up until this one here, Gretel De Paz, who was a really, really good young fighter. That was for the WBA Oceania title at the time. And then we parted ways. And then she obviously went on to... She lost to Shannon O'Connell, of course, in Bendigo. That was on the Zarafa Mundine undercard. And then, to her credit, she got a world title fight a year later, beating Melissa Esquivel for the IBF Super Bantamweight title. Had a really good win over Susan Ramadan, and then, of course, lost it in her last fight to Ali Scottney. No disgrace in that. Ali Scottney is a very good fighter, even though she's only had the 6 fights. Is it? No, sorry. She's had, so she's 8-0 at the moment in that fight, obviously, there as Ali Scottney. All right, so on to the fight itself. All right, what do we got there? Hang on, what do we got there? A couple of comments. Kyle Champion, good to see you on here, Kyle. I knew you probably would comment on the females. If you have any fights as badly as last time, Shanika will drop her. I think Shanika will play her similar to how Shannon Courtney fought her. Keep her to the outside and set traps. Yep. And Paul says, I didn't know that. Yep, fighting on the Kambosos card. She spanked O'Connell. Yep, well, everyone knows I'm Team O'Connell, but full credit to Ebony Bridges in that fight. She really brought it, fought the performance of her career, and stopped Shannon O'Connell, which I never thought anyone would really do, to be honest. But really fought a great fight against Shannon, but let herself down a little bit in her last fight, of course, because that Japanese fighter probably didn't really have a lot of business beating her, but she did. Is that more of an indication of the real Ebony, or was she exposed, or was it simply an off night? I suppose we'll know if they fight in a rematch. Paul says, sounds about correct. Who's doing the promotion for Kambosos fight? I think there's a few different ones involved, Paul. I think there's the Bella, Top Rank. I think even No Limits involved because it's a pay-per-view thing. I think Duco might be involved as well. So there's a few fingers in the pie there anyway. All right, so on to the fight itself. I'm thinking Ebony Bridges, I think, well, it's a tough one because both have shown an ability or a habit of coming forward, but they can also both box. Now, Shanika Johnson's come forward a lot in her fights, but on the flip side, I remember when she fought Shannon O'Connell and she backed up for the entire fight. Ebony, on the other hand, has sort of boxed in the past, but came forward, especially against Shannon. So I've got a feeling that Ebony sort of pushes the pace a little bit and takes sort of center ring. I think Shanika Johnson elects to box her a little bit more. And I just think the overall experience of Shanika Johnson, in my opinion, would be far too much for Ebony Bridges. I think Ebony, if I'm going to be honest about it, I think she's a very, very limited fighter. Again, full credit to her for what she did to Shannon O'Connell. That was a great performance. But I think, take that fight aside, I think she has been a little bit ordinary in a lot of her fights. I think she's been matched very, very carefully. It has been made to look good. Shannon Courtney obviously exposed her, and obviously the last Japanese girl did. Before that, I don't think she'd had any real tests. I think the three really good tests she'd won one against Shannon O'Connell and lost the other two. And as I said, was, I think, exposed a little bit in her last fight of what would probably happen if she had a really good boxer. I think, on the other hand, in my opinion, I think Shanika Johnson is a legitimate world-class fighter. She showed that with her winning the belt. I think Esquivel was a lot better champion than what Roman was. I think her performance against Susan Ramadan was very good. And I even think her loss to Ellie Scottney was a good fight for her as well. And she had a very extensive amateur career. Ebony Bridges didn't. So she's had, 17 fights. Ebony Bridges has had 11. Throw in the amateur experience, and then on top of that, throw in the overall ability of both girls. And I think Shanika Johnson, for me, wins a clear-cut 10-round decision. Now, the reason I've got it on the card is just for the appeal that it would bring. The real boxing fans, I think it would really appeal to them as well. I think it's a really, really good matchup. But also, of course, it's the eyeball factor, and I hate talking about that with the females. But at the end of the day, both of these girls have put themselves out there big time as far as with their weigh-ins. We all see how Ebony dresses. Shanika's now gone down that track, promoting the OnlyFans thing, all that sort of stuff. So I think this fight would bring a lot of eyeballs to the event, not just for the boxing, but obviously the non-boxing, if you can say. But overall, I think for me, I'm more concerned about the boxing side of things. And I think it's a really, really good fight to have on the card. Now, one female fight that it was a toss-up to have on this card. The other one I was looking at was Sky Nicholson and Beck Hawker. So it was a toss-up between these two, who was going to make the card. But I just think this one is a little bit more fan-friendly. I think Sky Nicholson's not the most exciting fighter. I know she's got the looks and everything else, but she's not really the outgoing type of personality. Speaks well, very well spoken, all that sort of stuff. Beck Hawker, I'm a big fan of Beck Hawker. I think she brings it, but I just think, again, we had to have a bit of a balance on the card, and I just think, as far as a high-profile female fight goes, this is a little bit more up the pecking order than Sky Nicholson and Beck Hawker. So there you have it. I've got Shanika Johnson by unanimous decision. I've got a couple of comments that have come from there. Sorry about that. Paul is Team O'Connell. Well, she'll be back soon, Paul. So you can get on the shotgun bandwagon again. Paul says Parr versus Robinson is a way better fight than this one. Okay. Well, you might be right there, Paul. It might be a lot closer than this one. But again, these girls are established, stars in Australian female boxing. And that is a fact. These two, I think, are the two top girls we have. Although, no, I take that back. Sky Nicholson, for me, is number one. These two girls would be number 2 and 3 for me as far as pound for pound on the female list. But I just think this fight's got so much appeal written all over it. You're right. Arguably, the Parr versus Robinson fight would be a better fight, but this one is the high-profile fight, and both of these girls have really big profiles in and out of the ring. So that gets the nod. Peter Nutt says Johnson. Yep. Who else have we got there? There is the boxing kangaroo. Carl, how you going there, mate? A little bit different format tonight, but thanks for tuning in. Andy, g'day, mate. How you going? Thanks for joining. I'm not sure this is normally your type of show, but welcome, mate. I hope you tune in for a little bit and give us your opinion. Kyle says, one of my favourites, Ramadan and Johnson. Johnson was electric with the worst cut I've ever seen in women's boxing. Well, Kyle, I'm with you there, mate. I was at the fight, and you could just see the blood spurting out of her eye or her forehead when she got inspected by the doctor. And in my opinion, I have no doubt whatsoever, by the way, the fight should have been stopped. 100% it should have been stopped. I don't know why. I know it only gone, was it 2 or 3 rounds, but for me, it should have been stopped on the spot. Because when you've got a wound on your head and the blood is actually spurting out of that said cut, and it wasn't like it was on her cheek or around the eye, so it didn't go in. This was purely in her face, eyes, nose, mouth, you name it, and not just hers. In poor old Susie Ramadan's face as well. I remember at one stage, in one of the clinches, poor old Susie pulled out and had to wipe the blood out of her mouth and her eyes because it was coming from her. So I really felt for her in that, and it should have been stopped 100%. But it was a really good performance by Shanika Johnson. And anyway, I think she gets the nod over Ebony Bridges. Let's go through the comments there. Andy, still a high-quality fight? Yeah, it is, mate. I think it is. Sometimes you got to have fights. This is a promoter's type of event where sometimes you've got to put fights on your card it's about money and eyeballs on your event. And I don't think you could get much bigger, especially in Australian boxing, than these two girls locking horns. I know you can maybe throw Shannon O'Connell in the mix event, but Shannon's fought both of these girls for one apiece. And as I said earlier, Sky and Beck Hawker would be good, but I just think this has got appeal all over it. All right. Bill Hack. I would love to see Luke Jackson clip Garside. Isn't he retired, Bill? That would be a good fight, by the way. Harry got one over our Tassie lad. So I'd love to see Luke even it up and bunch the polish off Harry's fingernails. No disrespect. I think Luke's retired, yeah. And I'm glad he retired on a good note, Bill. He's obviously a legend in Tassie boxing and, a former world title challenger, of course, Olympian, Commonwealth Games, all that sort of stuff. So he's a quality human being. He's Luke Jackson. And obviously being a Tasmanian, mate, I can understand why you're going to want to get a little bit of revenge. All right, Paul says, Sky looks like she will be the real deal. I have my first pro fighter on the pay-per-view promotion card in calendar 23rd of March. All right, good stuff, Paul. All the best with that. And I said earlier, mate, Sky, she's the real deal. I think she wins that WBC belt. No issues whatsoever, and hopefully gets that fight maybe with Amanda Serrano down the track. But we're talking about this fight for now. Cole says Sky is still developing, still learning. She's yet to have a breakout fight, but give it time. It will happen. Yeah, 100%. Kyle, I think she wins that world title. I don't see anyone apart from Serrano, to be honest, that could get in her way. Paul says Sky, Taylor, Neeks, Bridges, and Jazzy are all friends united in hatred against Shotgun. Yeah, well, they are. Look, Shadow's one of those. She's probably obviously from the former era, I suppose. All these girls are obviously in with each other. Look, end of the day, look, Shotgun, she's fought and beat Taylor. She's fought and beat Neeks. She, of course, fought and lost to Bridges. The Jazzy Parr fight wouldn't happen. I wasn't aware that Jazzy Parr wasn't a fan of Shotgun. We all know what happened after the Bridges and Shotgun fight with Sky Nicholson. One thing I will say about that, I know I'm getting a little bit off track. Shannon copped a lot because of her, finger gesture and what she said to Sky Nicholson after the fight. Everyone only saw the action. They didn't see what actually happened before that actually occurred. Now, I know for a fact that during the fight, Sky was having a lot. She was in sort of near Shannon's corner, had a lot to say during the fight. And afterwards, when Shannon seen her in the ring, I can't remember if something was said, and Shannon just pretty much told her where to go. And that's what everyone saw. So there's always been a little bit of tension between the girls. It would be great to see those two girls fight as well. But let's just say when it comes to that, there's always two sides of the story. But I'm with you with the others. As I said, I wasn't sure about the Jazzy Parr situation, but hey, it's good. Hey, it's pretty competitive in the female boxing ranks in this country. So I think it's great. What it does mean is these girls all fight each other at some stage, and Shannon's fought nearly all those. I think all but one of those girls. So I think it's great. Sorry, all but two, I should say. Kyle says, well, Shannon has to take everything personally. She creates this divide. Yeah, as I said, Kyle, there's always two sides to the story. That's all I'll say. And I know I'm Team Shotgun. I know she's no angel. I get that. She'll be the first one to say. But with all of them, if you want to look at all the girls, Of course, her and Shanika were both under my umbrella at one stage, but there was always a little bit of tension because they were around the same weight, going in the same direction. And the Sky thing, as I just said, Taylor, look, who knows? But all I'm saying is, Kyle, there's always two sides of the story, mate. That's all I'll say. Paul says, can't stand Bridges. Yeah, well, one thing with Ebony, look, I got full respect for her as a fighter, just like any fighter that gets in there, to be honest. And I think I'll say she's been good for female boxing. A lot of people say she hasn't been, but I will say she has, just again for creating a little bit of hype in and outside the ring. But I've got to say, when she opens her mouth and starts talking, I've got to almost turn the volume down. It's a bit like the nails on the chalkboard, to be honest. But anyway, but as a fighter, respect. Kyle says, I didn't know Josie was part of the I Hate Shotgun crew. Well, all right, well, that's a different conversation. We'll move on. But that's the first fight of the card. Now we get into the main fight, 3 fights on the card, guys. We've got 3 big ones. I can't believe it's taken us an hour to get through just the main undercard. Let's get into the big 3. And we're going to start with, look at this fight, will ya? We've got Jason Maloney and Sam Goodman. Just as we're letting that simmer there, I'm going to bring up the records on BoxRec so we can have a quick look and pretty much go off just memory with their records, to be honest. I've seen them fight that many times, but we'll get them up and dissect Sam Goodman. All right, hang on. That's, where are we? Sam Goodman. All right. And Jason Maloney. All right, we'll start with Jason. All right, here we go. Well, you all like this here, speak. Oh, there we go. We've got an insider here. Daryl Maloney, part of, obviously, the father of Team Maloney. Total respect for Shotgun, hard on the sleeve warrior. Yeah, she is Daryl. And I've always, relationships aside, as far as the promotion stuff goes, always been a massive fan of her as a fighter. And what I will say to the knockers out there, this is one fighter. I know we're getting off subject here a little bit. She does cop a lot, I will say. But what I will... I'll always have her back because this is a fighter, and I promote her a lot of her fights and been with her for a long time. Not once ever even talked about terms and trying to go back and forth. All right, who is it? Yep, pencil me in. I just want to fight. Now, that might have went against her early in her career because she didn't get a lot of the big paydays she deserved because she just took whatever she was given. She just wanted to fight and didn't get paid much at all. But this is a lady or woman who not once ever questioned who she was fighting. She just wanted to fight the best, and that was it. And fight as often as she could. So that's why she'll always have my respect. And I know she's got some people out there she's rubbed up the wrong way, but all I'll say again is there's always 2 sides to the story. But anyway, all right. Let's get into our the first fight of the big 3. This is Jason Maloney. Now, it's not the smooth one anymore, is it? It is Mayhem Maloney. I just remember him early in his career as the smooth one, and he is Mr. Smooth. He's a great guy, and I'm not just saying that, by the way, Daryl. You know, I know the boys well enough to have that opinion. Now, Sam Goodman, actually, we'll go into Jason's record for starters. Let's go. All right, so 27-2 record, 19 knockouts. Started his career all the way back in 2014. And as a lot of the young prospects do, fought often and knocked everyone out in his path. I think pretty sure he had most of his first few fights as knockouts. I think, yeah, he did. Didn't actually go the distance until about his 10th fight, I think it was. Now, I came on board in 2016. There it is there. Is that the one? Yes, Enrique. No, it wasn't. Here it was. Jerpaul Valero was his first fight at the Melbourne Park Function Centre. Got the 7th round knockout, and there you can see there, he really made his run, really earned his world ranking, won numerous, I'll just take that comment off there from Daryl. Just won regional titles, Commonwealth titles, whatever it was, just racked up the wins. Pretty much in all those fights, there's always some sort of regional title on the line, and he earned his ranking. And then, of course, finally got his first world title shot against Emmanuel Rodriguez. Lost a razor-thin split decision. So you can see there the scores were 115, 113 twice for Rodriguez and 115, 113 for Jason. probably the main telling point of this fight is that Rodriguez probably won 5, if not 6 of the first 6 rounds. Really got off to a fast start. Jason had a little bit of some problems slowing him down, getting his range. By the time he really found his range and come home like a steam train, Rodriguez probably had a insurmountable lead. I think from memory, I think I gave Rodriguez 5 of the first 6, and then Jason come home, and I thought it could have been a draw or a point either way. So I'm not going to argue with the decision. Rodriguez earned his win. That's fine. But Jason earned so much from that, learned so much from that fight. And to his credit, he was back in the ring only 5 months later, and again started to rack up those wins. Naoya Inoue, absolutely no disgrace, obviously losing to Inoue. And actually, we'll go back a little bit as well, because you can see there in 2020, in the bubble, he beat Baez by seventh round stoppage. Then he had the Inoue fight, backed it up really quick. Was it quick? No, it was actually about 10 months later. But see, Joshua Greer, that fight was supposed to take place, I think, a year earlier. And again, really earned his ranking. See there against, is that Peliciti? Is that his name? That was on the, what card was that? And that must have been Haney Lomachenko. Haney and Kambosos, I think. But again, got those regional belts, earn another crack at the world title against Vincent Astrolabio in Stockton, California last year. I was lucky enough to be there for that fight. And who can forget that fight last month against Saul Sanchez? One of the toughest fights I've ever seen, and one of probably the bravest fights I've seen from an Aussie to win that fight. So he retained his WBO bantamweight title. 8 rounds to 4 on 2 cards, and 6 rounds to 6 on the 3rd card. On to his opponent, Sam Goodman. 17-0. So he's had a few fights under his belt. So turned pro back in 2018. It's just gone through the stages there. And look, he's, to his credit too, he's had no limit backing him from pretty much day dot. They have invested a fair bit of money in Sam, and again has really earned that world ranking. Hasn't had that world title shot yet, obviously, but won numerous regional belts and hasn't been afraid to step up. And you can see there against TJ Donaghy, former world champion. Good wins over Alim there, undefeated. Flores was no slouch, and against Lou, again, undefeated. So he's, of course, fighting Mark Sleeves, which is, I think, is a bit of a, I won't say step backwards, but it's a bit of a just to keep busy fight for me. So so there it is. So there we go. Let's get into the fight itself. Now, it's at 122. But it could easily be, say, 120 catch weight. Most of these fights are catch weights, but again, Jason started his career at 122 and went back to 118. Sam Goodman's been at 122 the whole journey. We'll get a couple of comments there. Wow, I've been obviously too busy. Team Maloney, 100%. Maloney boys are so humble, and my wife and I absolutely love these young men. Well, one thing I can tell you, Paul, I met these guys for the first time 10 years ago, and I tell you what, have not changed one bit in the last 10 years, winning world titles, fighting for world titles, fighting at the MGM Grand in Vegas or Stockton, California, or on massive cards at Marvel Stadium. Never once have they declined an interview with anyone, basically, or an autograph. So anyway, we'll stop the Maloney love fest for now, because we've got a fight to judge here. Never met Sam Goodman, by the way, but by all accounts, he's a gentleman as well. All right. Paul says 50-50 fight. Experience on Jason's side, youth on Goodman's side. What's Jason, 33, I think he is now? D-Style. This is not a show I thought you might have been on, mate. I wasn't quite sure you knew about the Aussie boxing scene. Jazzy doesn't dislike Shannon. I see her like Shannon's post all the time on Insta and vice versa. I see Jazzy to be honest, not part of the, what would you call it? The female side of things, with all respect to females out there, if you can imagine that. I think she's from that combat sports with the kickboxing and the Muay Thai, where I don't think they really get caught up in that sort of stuff, the catty sort of stuff. They just want to fight. She loves to fight. So, and that's rumours do spread fast, D-Style. We'll get through a couple of comments before I get my, I'll put my prediction in. Pound for pound, King, how's it going there, mate? welcome to the show. Again, I'm not sure this is really your area. I'm not sure you'll know a lot of the fighters. Actually, these fighters you should, because these are all the gun Aussie fighters. We'll get to your comment in a sec there, D-Style. Anthony says, Jason and Sam, credit to the families, both elite fighters. I'm torn on this. Yeah, it's a tough one. Only Sam's lack of firepower concerns me. All right. Kyle says, this fight will go the distance, a pure out boxer fight, and I'm leaning to Sam. Okay, all right. All right, well, on to my verdict on this. We'll get a few more comments as you're coming through there. Look, this is an intriguing fight because both of these guys have shown an ability to both press the action, take center ring, really be the aggressor, and they've also shown the ability to box. We saw Jason against Astrolabio box so well for that. He knew probably from the start it was going to be a tough night if he took Astrolabio on head on, and the plan was to box and move and box beautifully. Same thing against Saul Sanchez. Strangely in that fight, though, I thought he had more success coming forward than on the back foot. But either way, showed an ability as he has to either push the action and pin Sanchez on the ropes or box on the outside as well. So very, very multi-dimensional is Jason. As for Sam Goodman, same thing, has shown an ability to press the action from center ring, but also really, really good at being on the outside. The reason I'm going to go for Jason Maloney in this fight is, one is the experience factor, of course, but also comes down to the power. Jason has got legitimate power, a lot of knockouts on his record. Let's just go back. He's had 19 knockouts in 27 wins. Look, he's not, I won't say he's a pure knockout puncher, but he's a lot heavier puncher than what Sam Goodman is. The way I see the fight going, I think this is a fight in which Jason does take center ring and he pushes Sam Goodman back. I think he's a lot stronger than Sam Goodman, even though he has been campaigning at a lower weight. I'm just not sure Sam has got the... I think ability-wise, I think you could probably arguably say he matches Jason. But I just think overall, Jason's just got a whole deeper bag of skills and things to pull on than Sam. I think Sam, look, he's fast, really good footwork, throws really good combinations, which might trouble Jason early in the fight. But I just think as the fight goes on, Jason starts to close the gap, close the range, start to get a little bit closer to Sam. I just think he overpowers Sam in the end, and I think he has the ability to maybe stop Sam late. I just think, especially if the fight happened now, because Jason, like most fighters that win world titles, the whole demeanor changes, the whole attitude changes. And I just think when you become go from a contender to champion, we've seen it with Jaya Pataya, similar mindset. Everything just changes. You can just see there's just a different aura about them. And I know it's hard to explain, but I see that with Jason now. Very, very comfortable with himself, being a world champion. He knows he belongs there. He knows he's a legitimate world champion. And that can sometimes be the difference in a fight against someone like a Sam Goodman who hasn't actually reached those heights yet. And I just think the experience factor of Jason, as I said, the power difference between the two, if it does get willing, I just think Jason has the answers to everything that Sam Goodman throws at him. And I'm a big fan of Sam Goodman, by the way. I think he can maybe down the track, if Inoue moves up, fight for a world title. I'm not going to say he's going to win a world title, but definitely has the ability to fight for a world title. But in this particular instance, I think Jason either wins by late round stoppage or has a comprehensive 10-round decision over Sam Goodman. So what do you guys think? I'll go to some comments there. Carl says Sam can box a move. Yeah, he can. No questions there. Sam doesn't have the skill set to beat Jason. Yep, I would agree on that. D-Style says I'm not sold on Sam yet. And this is what it comes down to a little bit too, doesn't it, D-Style? I mean, a lot of the times you see a fighter you think is at the level and you think they can push a certain world champion and you think they've got it all, and then they get into that situation and they get exposed. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to Sam, but it's just, for me, unproven at world level, where Jason Maloney is 100% proven at the level. So that's why I've got Jason Maloney winning this fight. So So Carl says Jason against Saul Sanchez, the fight of the year contender. Now, I haven't spoken to Jason since he's got back. Just a few messages going back and forth, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's just starting to feel better about himself now, because you've got to remember the what they put themselves through in camp. You might have 10 to 12 weeks in camp. Then you've got the 12 rounds of that fight itself, which was an absolute war. I've got no doubt he'd just be starting to feel like himself again now. So, for me too, Carl, that was a fight of the year contender. I don't know if Sam is good. If he's good, man, yes. Yep, I get that there, mate. Carl said, I'm not sold on Sam at all, Eric, but I think he beats Jason. Jeez, Carl. Okay. I want to see what happens when Goodman fights someone with quick feet. Well, that's one thing that Jason doesn't necessarily have, but he cuts off the ring so well. And Jason's just an all-round, just very overall good fighter. Does everything well. I suppose that's the best way to describe Jason. Didn't Aleem have good footwork? Yeah, good point. Yep. Reese Ali was quick. Sam took care of him. Yeah, okay, yep. Good argument there. I don't think Jason would be trouble with Sam's power. No. And that's for me the difference, Carl. That is the difference between both of these guys. That I just think Jason's overall strength and power is just going to be a little bit too much for Sam. D-Style says Jason beats Goodman. Keep Goodman away from Inoue. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a bad matchup for me, because at least Jason had some power when he fought Inoue. Sam, unfortunately, I just don't think he's got anything to keep Inoue off him. Look, maybe the lateral movement. He's got good lateral movement, does Sam Goodman, so maybe that keeps him in the fight, but I just don't think he can keep him off long enough. I think that ends not well for Sam, if I'm being completely honest. Be honest there, D-Star. Yeah, Inoue via murder. Yep. What do we got? Hey, he defended his title against a great underrated boxer in Seoul. I agree with you, mate. And he's fighting again on Lima versus Cambo undercard. That's a guy on a mission. And that's the thing about Jason and Andrew, for that matter, Carl. And I know it must seem like I'm a little bit on the Maloney train on this one. I probably am, but I've just seen the way they operate there, mate. And again, like the Shannon O'Connell thing, anyone, anywhere, anytime. I just want the best fights. And that's what these guys have always been about. And I don't think, to be honest with you, I've ever heard a negative word about the boys, to be completely honest with you. So, what do we got? D-Style says, I think pressure fighters will bust these pipes on Goodman too. Yeah, 12 rounds is a long time. It really is. Goodman needs to stay away from Inoue. Yep, no arguments there. We're probably a bit biased. We are, mate. I'll admit that. I'll admit I'm biased for the Maloneys. We better get on to the next one soon, guys. We'll get a few more comments. What's that say? Goodman is like a poor man's version of Sonny Edwards to me. Well, yeah, okay, that's your opinion, mate. Love his fight. Do you think it will ever happen? No, I don't, Paul. I think Jason, what is he, 33 now? I think he's still got 2 or 3 good years ahead of him. He's looked after himself so well. And probably bar from a couple of fights, hasn't really had those really bad, or those wars that really take it out here. We see a lot of battle-worn fighters. Jason is not one of them. I know he did get stopped by Inoue, but you take that out, I think the only real fight that will consume me a little bit as far as being battle-worn is that Sanchez fight. That was a tough fight. But I think he's got 2 to 3 good years left in him, which would take him to 35, 36. Look, at this stage, I just hope Paulie just gets the biggest fights and, more importantly, earns some really good coin, really cashes in on that belt so he can walk away in a couple of years' time and own his house and have some money in the bank for the kids' college funds, all that sort of stuff, and live a comfortable life. Like I wish for all fighters, to be honest. Does it happen, though? I don't think so. I think by the time Sam maybe gets to that level, I think maybe Jason might be down the path and looking for something else. 4 fighters I refuse to bet against: Inoue, Haney, Crawford, and Opataya. Very good quartet there, Kyle. Peter says, Jason didn't Chavez a bad fight against Inoue. He was a freak. Yes. What do we got? Ian, woohoo. Okay. Hope you're having a good night there, Ian. Sorry. Just to elaborate on that. So Jason didn't have Chavez a bad fight against Inoue. He was a freak. Okay. I sort of understand that, mate. That's bad for Sam. Inoue, scary good. Generational talent before our eyes. D-Style says, you never know. Goodman might end up shocking us all and dominate the division. Yeah. He might, 100%. He might do that, but until he actually gets to that stage, I definitely think he's at world level, D-Style. I do. But in a way, if you're going to be at world level, I'm not sure I'd want to be knocking on the door of a world title and in a way holds all the belts. That's all I'm saying. And that goes for anyone, not just Sam. Peter says, smart people will keep Goodman away from Inouye. Will they? No Limit has just shown a propensity just for wanting the guys to get the best fights, and if they're ready, they'll throw them in. So I think Sam would want that fight. I think he would. I think he'd want that. D-Style, Nick style, bad for Bridges. Yeah, as I said, mate, I think Neeks wins that hands down. Neeks would move and Bridges would follow. Unfortunately, though, I just think she's too slow on her feet, D-Style. She's not fast with her hands either. Stamina, questionable. I just think Neeks wins that fight every day of the week. Goodman's last fight was average. Yeah, we'll wait till you see the next fight, mate. I think he'll look pretty good in that against Sleeves, to be honest, because I don't rate Sleeves really at that level. All right, guys. Well, we've got to keep going because we'll be here all night. We've got 2 fights to get through, and they are the co-main and the main. Even though if you want to call the Maloney-Goodman fighter not a co-main, well, could easily be obviously its own probably pay-per-view fight, to be honest. All right, here we go. Liam Wilson. All right, guys. So 2 fights to go, and our co-main is George Kambosos Jr. and Liam Wilson, 10 rounds at lightweight. Now, I know Liam Wilson is coming up from 130, but he has mentioned that he'd have no dramas doing that. George Kambosos, of course, well, he's got a massive fish to hopefully fry in May. So maybe hypothetically, we could say that George has won that belt and Liam has beaten Valdez, can't get a shot again at Navarrete, so moves up and they're going to fight at lightweight. And who knows, if that is the case, it could be for George's IBF lightweight title 12 round. But anyway, for argument's sake, 10 rounds at lightweight. Let's start with George. We'll quickly go through his record because we all sort of know where he's at. So turned pro back in 2013. So he's been a pro for 10 years, nearly 11 years. So he's had a few, what's he had? How many fights? 23 fights in 11 years. So probably not a lot of fights when you think about it. Hasn't been knocked around too much. Did the usual thing. I remember the Brandon Ogilvie fight back in 2016. Really, really good performance from George. Probably his first signature win. I actually promoted Camille Bella at the time they fought. And got him that, or helped get him that Kambosos fight, and he was badly exposed in that. Hasn't got the scores there, but George won every single round, unfortunately. But then, again, just aligned himself with the right people. You can see there with the wins over Mickey Bay, Lee Selby, then, of course, that massive win over Teofimo Lopez. No disgrace losing to Devin Haney twice, and I know the Maxie Hughes fight wasn't the most memorable fight or his best performance. End of the day, he did get the win and got that IBO world title. And now he comes up against Vasily Lomachenko. So 21-2. Let's go to Liam Wilson. Oh, sorry, I haven't got the right one there. Where is he? There he is. 13-2 with that big fight against Oscar Valdez coming up. So turned pro only in 2018. So hasn't been a pro for that long. Nearly, was that 4.5 years. Brent Rice was a good win early. I haven't been scared to put him in with good fighters. You see there against Moro Prooni, 11-2-1. Jesus Quadro, I promoted that fight. Knockout of the year. If you haven't seen it, look it up on YouTube. Dropped him on the left hook, an amazing punch. Jackson Woods, well, that was just a routine win. And it wasn't. And then he obviously had that setback against Joe Noine, avenged that loss, and since then hasn't looked back. Navarrete fight, of course, no disgrace losing that in 9th round. Questionable that he should be the world champion as we speak. And the Jackson John England fight was a great win for him. And, of course, now England's got the fight against Jamal Herring. So, and, of course, as I said, Valdez is next for Liam Wilson. All right, so let's get into the fight itself. Kambosos Wilson, who wins? Hang on, we'll go through there. I think Wilson pulls it off, says D-Style. Upset of the night. Okay. Carl disagrees, says Wilson would get destroyed. Carl says Paro versus Kambosos, much more entertaining fight. I did actually think about that fight, Carl, but George Kambosos has made no comments whatsoever about going to 140, so I put a line through that and went for this fight as well. That, for me, it was definitely on the cards. But in this instance here, Liam Wilson has said he plans to go to lightweight if it takes that to get a fight with Kambosos. Kambosos has made no mention at all about 140. That would be a ripper fight, though, wouldn't it? D Style says Kambosos doesn't destroy anyone, though. Who has he destroyed? That might be another issue for episode of Talking Point, that one. Just my opinion, Kambosos wins 8 rounds from 10. Yep, that's cool, mate. That's why we're doing it live, so we can get opinions. Liam Wilson, for me, think his punching power too much and George too easy to hit. No shame in losing to Haney, 100%, mate. Okay, and I still, look, again, I'm going to go aside. I still cannot believe that George Kambosos was criticised for losing to Devin Haney. I really can't. Yes, they were both lopsided losses, but Devin Haney has just done that to everybody. The Maxie Hughes fight, okay, he probably deserves some criticism. Wasn't a great performance, but he still got the win, and we can argue all night who won. That's another story. But I still don't understand why George gets criticism when, if you look at his record, having fought Mickey Bay, Lee Selby, Lopez, Haney, Hughes, and now Lomachenko all in a row. I just cannot see how people fault the guy. I really don't. Anthony says, we got Liam Wilson for me. I think he's punching back. Yeah, I did go through that one. Kid's been trained by every top coach and fighter. Yep, did go through that one. Oh, hang on. That was Paul. Kambosos KOs Liam, full stop. Okay, well, that's actually an exclamation mark, Paul. Not a full stop, but I get where you're coming from. All right, Kambosos had one amazing win. Credit to him, but other than that, he's been solid, but I don't know. I think Wilson can fluster him. Yeah, well, that's why I put on the card D-style. I think it's a ripper fight. Kambosos KOs Liam. Let's laugh out loud. You're dreaming. Okay. Kambosos, new coach, is a head coach of the Russian Olympic team. Yep. Hang on, what have I got there? Paul says, I like Wilson in this matchup. Love both guys. Okay. Who has Kambosos knocked out? All these other guys are ducking Haney. That's a different argument. D-Style, how are you convinced on Wilson? I know Kambosos had 3 shit fights in a row, but there's nothing impressive about Wilson. He struggled with England. Been like 5 years since Kambosos got a TKO. In a competitive fight, I'm leading to Kambo, to be honest. All right, well, let's break it down a little bit. One thing I will say, I'm actually really surprised and pleasantly surprised that there's a lot of you guys out there that are going for Liam Wilson, because this is probably the one fight I thought, well, no one's going to give Liam a chance. Kambosos wins the fight easily, but I wasn't convinced by that. Now, I'm a big fan of George Kambosos. I haven't always been that way, I will say. But I'm just, as I said before, with his career, you just cannot fault his career. I'm with you, D-Style, as far as his knockout ratio goes. What's he had? 10 knockouts and 21 wins, so less than a 50% knockout ratio. So I'm not going to say, I don't think anyone's really arguing that he's a big puncher. I've never seen him as a big puncher. He's more a volume puncher. And obviously, as the competition has gotten better, the knockouts have even been less than they were before. And as you said, he hasn't had a stoppage since 2019 against Richard Penner, who was 11-2. So I'm with you there, mate. I make no arguments either that George is not a big puncher. Liam has shown that he can obviously punch, but again, as he's gone through the ranks of the better opposition, probably has shown that he has struggled just a little bit. His last 2 wins against Carlos, hang on, I'm looking for all his, can't sort of see it there. Carlos Maria Alanis and Jackson John England didn't get the knockout against either one of those 2 guys. But he has had some highlight real knockouts. Don't be rest assured for that. And one of them, as I said, was on my show against Quadros, where he absolutely put him in the next week with a left hook. Actually made him spin around and land on his face. So look, as far as the fight goes, I think Liam is the aggressor in the fight. I think he pushes George back. Actually, and I'm not going to say George is going to run or fight too much from a distance, but I think George just takes a step back and lets Liam come to him and tries to counterpunch Liam. Now, Liam is a good counterpuncher as well. And I think this is a very, very tactical fight. I think Liam is not scared to throw down with George Kambosos, and I think it does get willing in some instances early in the fight. I'll get a couple of comments as we go in this so I don't fall behind. We've been through that one. One TKO in the last 12 fights. He ain't knocking out Wilson. Yeah, I do agree with you, D-Style. Anthony says, I think George is disliked because of the rubbish he was talking after beating Teo. I think he really, wasn't after the Teo fight, after the Haney fight. I think you've seen a different George in those, last 2 fights, Anthony. And I'll admit, when I saw him at the press conference for the first Haney fight, I thought, oh no, that's really sort of cringe. And I think he would agree with that. I remember he had the shades on and the belts and the flash suit and all that sort of stuff, but really impressed with the way he come back in the second Haney fight and especially in the Hughes fight. Very, very classy guy. And I think especially in the Lomachenko press conference, I thought he handled himself really, really well. I really did. And I'm really 100% on board with George. Yeah, he probably tends maybe to say the odd thing here or there that you sort of roll your eyes a little bit at. But overall, I think he's really matured into being a world-class fighter. And I think to some extent Liam has as well. And all the credit to him for taking on Valdez in the States. But we have to pick a winner. What do you got there, D-Style? Does anyone think Kambosos beats Navarrete? Good question. Now, that's a possible fight. Nav at 135 now. Against Navarrete, his coach was screaming, jab, jab, jab. What did he do? Everything else but jab. Yeah, well, I think if they had the time again, Kyle, they wouldn't have got so excited after the knockdown and he would have went back to boxing a little bit. I know Benny Harrington in the corner was saying the jab and he ignored it. So, and he needs to do better or to actually listen to Benny in the corner if he's going to beat Valdez. So, Navarrete beats him on points in good slugfest. D-Style says it's hard to jab Navarrete though because he's so unorthodox. He's the most unorthodox fighter I think I've ever seen. He reminds me a little bit of a lighter Dennis Andrews, D-Style, if you can remember him when he fought Tommy Hearns and, of course, our Jeff Harding. Just looks anything but an elite boxer, but just keeps winning. He almost wants guys to throw textbook jabs, and then he does his crazy unorthodox stuff. Yeah, I thought Valdez had beat him, if I'm being honest, D-Style, and I was surprised that he beat Valdez very comprehensively. All right, so let's get to the result. As I said, I see Liam sort of being the aggressor, George just taking a step back, trying to counter him. I think Liam, I think really pushes the fight, and it's going to be a lot close. Well, I was going to say a lot closer than what a lot of people thought it was going to be, but by the looks of things out there with the chat, I think a lot of you guys sort of agree that Liam gives George all he can handle. I'm still going to, I'm going to stick with George in a close fight because I think even though, again, I think I thought it was going to be a lot closer than what maybe a lot of people thought it would be. I just think George is a little bit more experienced. I don't know. We've got to pick a winner. And I can't really think of an exact reason why I'm picking George. I suppose I'm going to just go for overall ring generalship. And Liam, I hope he obviously shows me I'm wrong when he fights Valdez. Excuse me. But I just think George has the ability to box from a distance, punch when he needs to punch, boxes when he needs to box, and I just think he gets over the line against Liam Wilson. Liam, if you're watching this, I've got to see him in, where's he fighting? Glendale, Arizona next month. Please don't hold it against me. It's nothing personal. I think you're a great young guy and a very, very good elite boxer, elite boxer. I've got to pick one. So I'm going to go for George Kambosos by decision. And I don't think it's an easy night, but I just think George's overall ring generalship and class is enough to get over a very game Liam Wilson. So, well, there you go, D-Style. Changed my mind. Kambosos wins controversial decision. Cole, Andy, and pound for pound were judges and screwed Wilson. Yeah, look. I know his last couple of fights haven't been the best for George Kambosos, and I'm not saying he's a knockout artist. I'm certainly not saying he's in that real top 2 or 3 of the world. But hey, you win some and you lose some when you test yourself. And I don't think anyone can argue with George that he's taken one elite fight after the other, And I take my hat off to him, which is why those fights I think are enough. You always got to look at one thing that's going to be the difference in a fight. And I just think those fights against the absolute elite opponents that he's come up against is enough to get George Kambosos over the line against Liam Wilson. And a very game Liam Wilson. And again, you have to pick a winner. And I've gone for George Kambosos. Very good point there, Daryl. How much you're losing on this promotion? Yes, good call. Well, look, we went through the sums at the start of the show, and I think we had 15 million to play with. I might come out with maybe $1 million or something in my pocket there, mate, because I reckon that they're going to cost me a bit, I would think. All right, so there it is, guys. While you're talking amongst yourselves, I'll get the next fights up, and I've got a feeling this isn't going to take too long to discuss, because I reckon I know exactly what the results are going to be. All right, Paul, same question. Does this fight ever happen? I think there's a chance this happens. Again, it comes down to results of the next fights, Paul. I think that if George loses to... Look, there's a couple of things. If George loses to Kambosos... I keep saying Kambosos. If George loses to Lomachenko, where does he go from there? He's not going to be part of the real elite echelon of lightweight fighters out there, because I keep saying Kambosos. Lomachenko is probably going to look for a Shakur Stevenson fight, or another Haney fight, or maybe a Tank Davis fight, which I would love to see, by the way. That's the fight I would like to see, Lomachenko and Davis. But anyway, that's a different story. Liam Wilson, if he beats Valdez, not much for him except for a world title fight, of course. But if there's not really anything coming, it depends on... I think Navarrete is moving up to 135, so he might get a crack. Well, he will. He will get a crack at a vacant belt if he beats Valdez. But look, maybe if he doesn't, and Kambosos loses, who knows? Maybe it's a big money fight in Australia that just gets George's attention. I just get the impression with George, though, he would just see that fight as a massive step backwards. No matter what happens with the Lomachenko fight, he would see Liam Wilson as a massive step backwards in his career. And I would think he either wants the biggest fights or not at all. I don't think he's really stressed about the Australian fight scene and whether people want a Liam Wilson fight. I don't think that matters to him. He's at that level now, and I just think it'll be all or bust for George. And I think even if he loses to Lomachenko, if he can't get more big international fights, I don't think he comes back. So to answer your question there, Paul, look, to be honest with you, I'm going to say no. I don't think the fight happens. Again, just my opinion. D-Style says, I actually think Kambosos could have done much better versus Haney if he wasn't allowed to hold so much. Yes. Yes. Have you got His Excellency paying? Yes. I'm going to need him, mate. I'm going to need him. Well, we're doing okay. I mean, look at that's probably the other thing I should have broke down. George is getting... I think I'm going to pay him $750 for this fight, and Liam $250. For the main event, I've got to say, well, we'll get to that fight in a sec. I think Tim gets 3 and Michael Zarafa 1. So shit, 4. We're up to $5 million there. So let's just say we've got a $10 million card for the fights. Or let's say $8 million, we'll say. A couple of $1 million for everything else that goes into it. So we're still in front by about $5 million. So I think I'm doing all right. Come a long way since the Malvern Town Hall, Daryl, I will say. What do we got? Tank didn't want any part of that fight against Loma, that is. Tank said, yep, stuff that. Yes, I agree. All right. You guys can talk about the other fights he's had. Yes, George has made great money fights, retire if he loses this. Yeah. As I said, Daryl, I just think, initially I thought maybe, but just I almost talked myself into it then. I just think George, at the stage of his career and the fights he's been in, I don't think he'd be able to get up for Liam Wilson as much as we might want it here. So I'm going to say, no matter what happens with the Lomachenko fight, it's either another big fight or it's nothing. I think even if he does lose to Lomachenko, I still think there's other fighters that are coming up and around the mark that would still see George Kambosos as a very, very attractive guy to fight on their way to maybe a world title shot, or whatever. So some good big money fights for George. And if you can't get him, I just get the feeling that he might retire. This is a guy that doesn't need the money, and I just don't think he needs. He's not the type of guy to me that'll hang around until he's 38 years old. All right, yes, D style. It's $100 pay per view the way we're going. All right, let's get into the main event. We've been going on for this for quite some time. Let's get into the big one. And, of course, it has to be Tim Tszyu, Michael Zarafa. Now, is it the biggest fight we've got in Australia? Now, you could probably define that in two ways. Biggest as far as the attention and money that it brings to the event. Or on the other hand, is it the best actual fight we can get in Australia? Now, I'm going to say yes to the former and no to the latter. I think it is the biggest fight in Australia by far. If you're gonna sit down, the biggest pay-per-view that features two Aussie fighters, and then this is it. As far as being the most competitive and best fight out there, then I'm going to say no. There's plenty of other fights that above that. But anyway, this is the fight that if you're going to put a big pay-per-view on, it's no question it headlines it. Let's go. Look, I'm not going to go to the records of both these guys. I think we've been around long enough to know exactly where they've both come from and what they bring to the table. So let's jump straight into both of the strengths and weaknesses, I suppose. Tim Tszyu, well, all we've seen, that's a bit harsh there, Carl. Says Michael will pull out fight week. Now, that's been a little bit harsh. That's a little bit low, Carl, but pretty funny either way. All right, so we all know what Tim Tszyu brings to the table. I think he's very Golovkin-esque as far as the way he hunts you down from center ring, makes you punch. He counter-punches you even though he's the aggressor. And that's why he's very similar to Triple G. I know that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but he is a very aggressive counter-puncher. He'll come to you, close the range, and make you punch first, and then he'll come back over the top of you. Okay footwork. Can cut off the ring okay, but isn't the fastest on his feet. So that is an area where he can be exposed. Not the fastest puncher, but very, very good timing. And as they say, timing beats speed. Good head movement, good defense, has been caught a couple of times, but overall a very, very good fighter across all facets of the skill set. So very hard to find a fault in Tim Tszyu, and a good resume as far as fighters go that he's come up against, especially in the last 12 to 18 months. Michael Zarafa. Look, he's probably his biggest thing is that, look, the pros that he's got, he can punch. He's had a lot of good knockouts in his career and has very good boxing skills as well. Good overall generalship, good footwork, good defense, okay hand speed, just does everything pretty well. Super conditioned, as is Tim Tszyu. That's where I don't think it will come down to the attrition rate of both guys. I think both guys are very, very, always come in super fit, super hard, super ready. The downside for Michael is I don't think he's had anywhere near, well, he hasn't had anywhere near the caliber of opponents that Tim Tszyu has. And that includes, I think the biggest win on his career is, for me, is obviously Jeff Horn. A great fight he fought in that fight, I will say. Now, I know Jeff had to jump 2 divisions to fight him at middleweight, but at the time, I think everyone still thought he'd still have way too much for Michael Zarafa, and Michael fought a great fight that night and fully deserved his win. Jeff Horn, of course, got the revenge in the rematch. And one thing I will say in the rematch is that Jeff Horn turned up in shape and mentally and physically on that night. And apart from the 9th round where he almost got stopped, he did put Michael down, and I thought he won that fight very comprehensively. So for me, that was a question mark for me with Michael. Jeff Horn turned up ready, and he couldn't really go with him. So that was my sort of fault with Michael. The Hardman fight, look, as impressive as it was, I don't rate it in the scheme of things of being an elite win, because again, I love Isaac Hardman, but at this stage, I don't see him as being at that top world level. I just don't see it. So a good win by Michael. Silenced all the critics out there, all the Isaac Hardman bandwagon, I suppose you'd call him, and did everything he had to do. But he was beaten comprehensively by Cal Brook,
comprehensively by Peter Quillen when he stepped up. He did lose to a Russian early in his career, but let's wipe that. He was only 21, 22 years old. So that's my critique of Michael Zarafa. Is when he's come up against elite fighters, apart from that first Jeff Horn fight, he has come up short. So that's where I think the difference is, or where I've got some doubts about Michael Zarafa. Onto the fight itself. I'm going to get a couple of your comments before I give my opinion there. I actually think this is the most one-sided fight on the card. Yeah, well, that could quite possibly be the way. Anthony says it doesn't last 3 rounds. Zoo destroys Zarafa, says D-Style. He also says, I think, the most uncompetitive fight. Paul, yep, I know you're a Zarafa fan there, mate. Yep. We're taking that out of this, though. I know it's hard, Paul. I know I was probably maybe guilty a little bit with Jason, but I 100% think he beats Sam Goodman, regardless of my relationship with the Maloney boys. But so get off the fence there, Paul. Give us your honest opinion. All right, Michael has Nonito Donaire training in for Lara. Did you know Michael left T Balance? No, I did. I did know that, Carl. Only by seeing on social media that he was now training with Nonito Donaire, and I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, for probably his last 10 fights, has almost had a different trainer every single fight and a different manager and a different promoter. This is a guy that jumps around a lot. But I did hear that, obviously, Carl, that he's now with Nonito. So I'm not sure how that all come about, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens with it or what effect Nonito Donaire has on Michael's performance against Lara and maybe in this fight as well. Team Batman says, easy win for Tim Tszyu. Okay. D-Style says, the counters will be devastating. Zarafa getting lit up like a Christmas tree. Cole says, I'll give Zarafa 9 rounds. Is that to last 9 rounds or to win 9 rounds? Not being biased because I train at his gym, I swear. Michael will have to be on his bike and keep busy, but Tim will break him down unless Michael can hurt him. Tough ask. Yep, okay. Bill Hack. I've always said 50-50 fight. Okay, now through activity, 12 months, maybe 65-35 goes the distance. Tim will make Michael soil himself. I gather you're not a Zarafa fan there, Carl. Zarafa versus Horn fights were exciting. I'll say they were great fights, D-Style. Unbelievable fights. And both fighters showed unbelievable heart in those fights. They really did. Paul says, to me, this is the most predictable fight on the card. Tszyu easy. Oh, I hate this. The main event's a letdown. It's supposed to be the fight everyone's looking forward to, but it's the letdown of the night. But look, I think all you guys and girls out there can't I don't think can argue that this is the biggest pay-per-view all-Aussie fight we have. Jeff was nothing pretty, almost a pure brawler, but entertained. Yes, that's Jeff Horn. D-Style says, Michael Zarafa telling Tszyu he's beating welterweights when a welterweight actually beats Zarafa. Yes, good point there, D-Style. And look, Cal Brook, I think that only went 12 rounds because Cal Brook wanted it to go 12 rounds. If I'm going to be honest about the whole thing. All right. Andy says, it would be great to see Tim and Mick settle the rivalry. I got Tim's calculator pressure shining through to get Tim the W. Will sell. Hayden says Tim doesn't break a sweat. Carl says I spoke with Rachel yesterday. It's Rachel Donaire. She said there were some conditions placed on Michael and he didn't agree. Is this with Alice, I'm assuming? I think so is he still training him there, Carl? Let us know. I think Zarafa goes out about round 6. Methodically broken down, then taken out. Maybe corner throws in the towel. Zarafa is a tough guy that can't take that from him. Yeah, he is. He'll come to fight, no doubt about it, which is why I've always said totally discount the whole running thing and pulling out from fights. That's just not the case. There's no way Michael Zarafa would have willingly pulled out of that fight because he didn't want to fight Tim Tszyu. I just don't subscribe to that at all. Pound for Pound King says, Lyndon hasn't Cambosa signed a 3-fight deal with Bob? I think he has, Pound for Pound King. I think Noonan Boy might have said something about that. If he's not, it's in conjunction with DeBella. DeBella's his promoter. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Top Rank have got options for him for three fights. But anyway, I'll have to confirm that. All right, on to my prediction, guys. Apart from, I think, Kyle that says he would back Zarafa, I think this fight pretty much goes one way, guys. I've got to agree with most of you out there as far as the result goes. I think Michael might be competitive for 2, 3, 4 rounds, but I think Tim, like he does in a lot of his fights, has a good look at Michael. But as the fight starts to settle, the dust settles, that is, and we get into a little bit of the groove, I just think it goes one way, and that's Tim chopping Michael down and stopping him in 6 or 7 rounds. I just, again, look back to that second Jeff Horn fight. Jeff Horn absolutely dominated Michael for the first 8 rounds of that fight, and he was in trouble in the 9th round, of course. And to Michael's credit too, he got dropped in the 9th round. Probably could have stayed down, but got up, and it was a great performance to actually survive that round, and then obviously the fight. But that fight for me shows that maybe Michael isn't really at the same. Well, I know he's not at the same level of Tim, and I don't think he's at that really elite level of some of the other guys out there. And I got a lot of respect for Michael. Don't get me wrong, but if I'm going to be completely honest, I just don't think he belongs at this stage in the same ring as Tim. And I think Tim breaks him down, chops him down, digs him underneath, over the top, you name it. And I just think he stops Michael in, we'll say, 7 rounds, in pretty much a beat down, if you ask me. Not just saying that Michael won't have his moments, and he's always got that ability, especially early, to land a few shots and make life hard for Tim. But I just think Tim, he's just a level above anything that Michael's ever come up against. And that includes Cal Brook and Peter Quinlan and Jeff Horn, of course. And I just think Tim wins that fight very easily. We've got to pick a winner, though. And again, I got a lot of respect for Michael, but I just don't think he belongs in that ring with Tim Tszyu. Carl says, for all the talk that's been talked, this fight will be good, especially the shit talk leading to the fight. Hey, it'd be great. I'm not quite sure, though, Carl, it would be that, to be honest. I think Michael would do his absolute best to do this. And we got a little bit of a taste of it, I thought, when they actually faced off before they were supposed to fight. Tim really didn't take the bait. I really don't see Tim, it's not his style to have the trash talking going on. I know he's a little bit happened in the recent Thurman press conference, but I think Michael does all the talking. I don't think Tim gets caught up in that. I don't think he takes the hook. I just think he stays professional, and I don't think he needs to do that to sell this fight. I really don't. I think this fight sells. Would it sell as much as Green Mundine won? I don't think so. Again, pay-per-view had only just come into Australia back in 2006 when that fight happened. I think if that fight happened now, you'd be looking at 250,000 views, which is equivalent to probably about 3 million views in the States. That's the type of appeal that fight had. This one, even though I know Michael's mentioned that this would be bigger than that one, I still don't think it eclipses Green Mundine. I know that's probably a bit hard for a lot of the international people to get their head around out there, but back in the day, Green Mundine was the biggest fight in Australian history, bar none. A little bit like Froch and Froch, whatever. And who did he beat? Groves. A little bit like that, or Ben Eubank. That's the type of rivalry that they had. Paul says, want minus opinions. Zarafa can win this fight with the correct fight camp. Zarafa wins against Lara. This fight can still happen. Yeah, it can definitely still happen. If someone asked that, I think it was Paul, this fight 100% can happen. Now, I know Tim doesn't really want the fight for various reasons, but sometimes you just got to take the biggest fight out there for you. And if Michael wins that WBA strap, it could be attractive to Tim in the next 12 months. Michael is training in Craigieburn. Thanks, Daryl. I appreciate it, mate. Who do you think would win? I'll get through a few of the comments and then we'll call it a night. Tim beats Zarafa coming off a 3-month layoff straight off the couch. Definitely a beatdown. Yeah, I think I agree with that, guy. So, look, I think we can all agree this would be, I think, the biggest pay-per-view card in history in Australia. Now, is it practical to have that card actually happen? Obviously not. But why couldn't we get 2 or 3 of those fights on the card? This is why we do it. Now, we actually got a few comments and suggestions about a dream fight scenario where we have the biggest dream fights in Australian boxing history. And as an example, Jeff Fennick versus Lester Ellis, and Johnny Famechon versus Lionel Rose, or George Kambosos versus Barry Michael, or one of those. Maybe if that's what you want to see, maybe we can do one of those next time, or we might do an international version or edition of what we've done tonight, where the best current day fighters against each other. How would it pan out? So if you've got any suggestions, let me know. D-Style, Sparks versus Paro should have been done by Matchroom. Look, if Stevie Sparks hadn't retired D-Style, that fight would have been on this card 100%. That would have been a great fight. Paro would have won, but it would have been a great fight. All right, guys. Well, we're going to call a night at that. If you've got any more comments, put it in the chat. I'm sure I'll get a lot of opinions after the fact when this is on YouTube. But again, if you want to see an American version of this, the biggest, not an American version, a world version, where we get the biggest fights internationally of all the biggest stars out there at the moment, we'll do the fight at the Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas in front of 80,000 fans. Who would you have as the biggest international fights to take place in Vegas? Get the Sheik or His Excellency out of it. There's a new cowboy in town. It's Boxing and Deep Dive Promotions. So let us know who you think. All right, guys. Well, thanks very much for tuning in. I must admit, I thought this might only go an hour. I've been at it for 2 hours, so I really appreciate it, as always, for tuning in. And we'll catch you in another couple of times with another edition of Dream Fights. Thanks, guys.